Africa does not need more money. If you think that Africa's infrastructure problem is a question of funding, then you need to think again. In 2020 alone, African countries committed over $81 billion to infrastructure. Yet approximately 600 million Africans do not have access to electricity. In rural communities, only 43% have access to clean water. And according to the Global Infrastructure Index on Quality, Africa scores only 38%. So if the funding is there, why do we have potholes? And if the funding is there, why do we have power cuts? If the funding is there, why do we have unfinished projects? This, my friends, is the paradox. And in this episode, we're going to look at what is really going on and what we can do to fix it. So Africa is a continent with enormous potential. Think about it. Africa has 1.4 billion people, the world's youngest population, 60% of the remaining arable land, and cities that are growing at 3 times the world average. But all this potential hits a wall when the basics do not work. Think about it again. Africa as a continent has nearly 700,000 kilometers of paved road for a continent that is bigger than the US, China, and Europe combined. Our per capita electricity is just 20% the global average. So my friends, the problem is not funding. In fact, Africa needs $2.4 trillion to close on the infrastructure gap by 2040. And we are currently investing a paltry $47 billion a year. But most of this money does not even actually turn into actual projects. Why? Because the problem is not funding. The problem is execution. And execution breaks down in 3 places. That is, we have planning, we have preparation, and we have performance. Let's start with planning. Right now, too many infrastructure projects in Africa are announced even before they have been properly defined. They are political slogans, groundbreakings without blueprints. 80% of major project announcements never materialize because they were not viable to begin with. Only 5 African countries have institutions that can consistently originate and develop infrastructure projects to investment standards. So what do we need to do? We need strong project development institutions. We need people who can say no to bad ideas and yes to bankable, de-risked and well-scoped ones. If it is not ready for its feasibility study, it is not ready to be announced. Now, even when a project is well planned, it needs to be prepared for investment. And this is where most deals fall apart. Only 1 in 10 infrastructure projects that enter into feasibility stages ever reach financial close. And of those that fail, 70% collapse because they weren't prepared properly, not because funding was not available. In other words, no one wants to fund chaos. So what do we need to do? One may ask. We need to structure our projects more like assets and not experiments. This means very, very clear financial models, standardized risk assessments, and thorough legal due diligence. Right now, most governments lack the technical teams to handle this. They rely on donors or private consultants who disappear after 6 months. We need permanent, locally run institutions that can prepare a concept into an investment-ready opportunity. And finally, let's talk about performance. Even if you plan it well, even if you prep it perfectly, can you deliver? For many projects, the answer is no. African infrastructure projects experience delays that are 17% longer than the global averages. Cost overruns are about 30% higher than in wealthier countries. And even when the projects are completed, maintenance is often neglected, accountability is low, and corruption eats away at impact. So how do we fix this? We bring in local operators who have skin in the game. We stop outsourcing every major project to foreign firms who don't have long-term interest in the communities they are building in. We empower African contractors, African engineers, and African-led partnerships, and who are incentivized to perform. In governments, they need to act less as gatekeepers and more as clients, demanding results, enforcing timelines, and paying for outcomes. Now, here's the shift we need to make. We need to stop treating infrastructure like charity and start treating it like a real investable asset class. Africa has over $1.8 trillion in institutional capital. That's the thing. Imagine if 10% of this was directed into infrastructure. But this is only possible if we package infrastructure as an investable product, one that delivers results, builds trust, and can be scaled. You pull off one successful project on time, within budget, and with measurable impact, and investors start calling you. It becomes like a flywheel. Execution builds confidence, and confidence attracts capital. Capital funds more execution. Let me give you one example. The main one submarine. It was developed by Africa Finance Corporation and it delivered 10 times more internet capacity to West Africa. It was led by Africans, planned properly, structured smartly, and delivered efficiently. And today, it is one of the most profitable digital infrastructure assets in the region. Not because someone donated it, but someone executed it. So here is the bottom line. Africa does not lack ambition. It doesn't lack resources. Neither does it lack ideas. It lacks execution. And execution depends on three things. You need smart planning, you need serious preparation, and you need consistent local performance. If we fix that, we don't just fix roads and power lines, we unlock trillions in opportunity. Because infrastructure is not about concrete and power lines. It is foundation for everything else. Jobs, businesses, education, healthcare, and trade. Next time someone says you Africa needs more money, please correct them. Africa does not need more money. Africa needs to execute. Thanks for listening. If this gave you clarity, share it with an engineer, a policymaker, a student, a founder. This is McKinsey the Engineers Podcast, where we break down the business of building the continent. I'm your host, Loire Newton, and until next time, keep building.